The sun hung low over the endless stretch of blacktop, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Highway 17. Dust devils swirled in the distance, kicked up by the relentless wind that carried the faint scent of sagebrush and diesel. Logan Grim Mercer gripped the handlebars of his weathered Harley, the engine's low rumble vibrating through his bones like an old friend's whisper. At 42, Grim was a man forged in the fires of forgotten wars and broken oaths, scars etched into his knuckles from bar fights he couldn't remember, and deeper ones hidden beneath the leather vest that bore the faded patch of the Iron Vipers, his chosen family. He'd lost his own blood to a senseless accident years back, a promise to protect them shattered in an instant. Now, he rode alone most days, hauling freight to keep the demons at bay, his life a quiet vigil against the chaos of the world. It was just past dawn when he spotted it, a cardboard box, battered and taped shut, twitching erratically on the shoulder like something alive was fighting to break free. No one else slowed. Semis thundered by in a blur of chrome and exhaust, their drivers too buried in schedules to notice. Grim's gut twisted. He'd seen too many discards in his time, stray dogs left to starve, veterans tossed aside like yesterday's news. Expecting a puppy or maybe a feral cat, he eased off the throttle, the Harley's growl fading to a purr as he pulled over. Gravel crunched under his boots as he dismounted, the morning chill seeping through his jeans. He approached cautiously, gloved hand hovering near the flaps. A soft, muffled sound escaped, not a bark, but a whimper, fragile and human. He ripped the tape away in one swift motion, the box unfolding like a secret too heavy to contain. Inside, curled amid crumpled newspapers stained with dirt, was no animal. A toddler stared up at him, wide brown eyes unblinking against the sudden light. The child couldn't have been more than 2, his tiny frame smeared with grime and road dust, cheeks streaked from tears that had long since dried. No cries, no flailing, just that steady gaze, as if the boy had already learned the world's indifference to please. Grim's breath caught, a cold fist squeezing his chest. The kid's clothes were threadbare, a mismatched shirt and pants that hung loose, and around his neck dangled a cheap plastic locket, half buried in the folds. This wasn't an accident. Someone had dumped him here, deliberate as discarding trash. Kneeling, Grim shrugged off his vest, the leather still warm from his body heat. He wrapped it gently around the boy, lifting him with arms that had once cradled fallen brothers in the sand-swept hell of distant battlefields. The toddler didn't resist, just nestled in, his small hand clutching the vest's edge like a lifeline. "Easy now, little man," Grim murmured, voice rough as gravel but laced with a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. The child's skin was clammy, chilled from the night air, and a faint bruise shadowed his temple, vestiges of some unseen cruelty. Grim's jaw tightened. He'd walked away from too many fights, buried too many ghosts, but this was a call he couldn't ignore. Cradling the boy against his chest, he scanned the horizon. No cars in sight, no witnesses, just the whisper of wind and the distant hum of traffic. He settled the kid in the sidecar he jury-rigged for odd jobs, padding it with his spare jacket. The engine roared back to life, a beast awakening, and they pulled onto the highway. But Grim didn't head for the precinct or the nearest town. No, that felt wrong. Cops in these parts were as crooked as the backroads, more likely to file reports than find justice. Instead, he veered toward the old Viper clubhouse, 20 miles off the grid, where the air smelled of pine and engine oil. His phone buzzed in his pocket as he rode, but he ignored it. The locket caught his eye in the rear view, a simple thing engraved with NV on one side. Noah Vance. It didn't matter yet. What burned in Grim's mind was the promise forming unbidden. He'd trace this back, uncover whoever had the heart to abandon innocence on the roadside. And if it meant calling in the Vipers, the brothers who'd stood by him through blood and betrayal, they'd ride as one. The clubhouse emerged from the scrub, like a fortress of rusted steel and weathered wood. Bikes lined up in silent formation under the overhang. Grim killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the boy's soft breathing. He carried Noah inside, the door creaking on hinges that hadn't been oiled since the last rally. The main room was dim, lit by shafts of sunlight filtering through boarded windows, the scent of stale coffee and leather heavy in the air. Jax, the club's grizzled enforcer with a prosthetic leg from the same war that had scarred Grim, looked up from a card game. His eyes narrowed at the bundle in Grim's arms. "What the hell you got there, brother?" Jax rumbled, tossing down his hand. The others, Rico with his tattooed knuckles, Lena the mechanic who'd patched more than engines, gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Grim laid Noah on the worn couch, peeling back the vest to reveal the boy's fragile form. "Found him on the highway. Box on the shoulder, moving like it was alive. Thought it was a pup." He paused, the weight of it settling. "Ain't no pup. Someone left him to the wolves." Murmurs rippled through the room. Lena knelt, her calloused hands gentle as she checked the toddler over, no broken bones. But the signs of neglect were clear. Hollow cheeks, the faint tremors from cold and hunger. She fetched a blanket and a bottle of milk from the communal stash, coaxing Noah to take a sip. The boy did, eyes never leaving Grim, as if recognizing the anchor in the storm. Jax scratched his beard, the lines of old wounds creasing his face. "Cops?" Grim shook his head. "Not yet. This feels bigger. That locket. Got initials. We start there." The Vipers exchanged glances, the bond of their chosen family tightening like a chain. They'd lost members to the bottle, to bad deals, but never turned from a brother's call. Grim felt it stir in him, that ancient oath they'd sworn under starlit skies: ride for the fallen, protect the innocent. Noah's arrival wasn't chance. It was a reckoning. As the boy finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Grim stepped outside, lighting a cigarette against the rising sun. The highway stretched empty, but clues waited. Tire tracks in the dust, whispers in the wind. He'd follow them, no matter the cost. For in saving this child, Grim was salvaging the promise he'd thought lost forever, to stand as shield when the world turned cruel. The first threads of the trail began to unravel that afternoon. A quick search on Jax's laptop pulled scraps, a missing persons report from a dusty border town, vague mentions of a family fractured by debt and desperation. But deeper, shadows loomed. Rumors of a smuggling ring using the highways for more than cargo, preying on the vulnerable. Grim's fists clenched. The Vipers would gear up, engines primed for the hunt. What started as a lone biker's mercy was awakening a force that corruption couldn't outrun. The clubhouse hummed with a tension that felt like the low growl of idling engines, the air thick with the tang of motor oil and brewing coffee. Sunlight slanted through the cracks in the blinds, painting golden stripes across the scarred oak table where the iron Vipers gathered. Grim stood at the head, Noah still bundled in Lena's arms on the couch, the boy's small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of exhausted sleep. The locket lay open on the table, its cheap metal catching the light like a forgotten beacon. N.V. Initials that now anchored them all to a path none had chosen but couldn't abandon. Jax leaned forward, his prosthetic legs scraping the floorboards with a metallic sigh. "All right, Grim, spill it. You ride up with a kid like he's your own, and now we're playing detective. What's the play here?" His voice was a gravelly drawl, tempered by years of pulling brothers from the brink, first in desert foxholes, then on these dusty backroads. Grim's eyes, shadowed by the brim of his faded cap, fixed on the locket. He could still feel the phantom weight of the boy in his arms, that unblinking trust piercing through his armored heart. "The play is, we don't let this slide. I found him like roadkill, taped in a box on Highway 17. No accident, someone meant for him to vanish. He traced the initials with a calloused finger, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat rising in his chest. Noah Vance. That's what it says. We start with that. Quiet, no badges involved. I've seen what happens when the law gets its hands on the lost. They file papers, forget faces. Rico, the wiry scout with tattoos snaking up his arms like barbed wire, nodded slowly. He'd lost a sister to a system that promised protection but delivered indifference, and the fire in his eyes mirrored Grimm's. I can hit the wires, brother, old contacts in the border towns, see if any whispers match, a family split, folks running from debts or worse. He pulled out a battered laptop, fingers flying across the keys, the screen's glow illuminating the web of scars on his hands. Lena rocked Noah gently, her mechanic's grease-streaked overalls a testament to the hands that fixed more than machines. He's tough, this one. No fever, but he's been through hell. Cold nights, empty belly. Whatever put him there, it wasn't kind. She glanced at Grimm, her voice softening. You sure about this? Call in the whole crew means stir in the hive. We got our own shadows chasing us. Grimm met her gaze, the weight of old promises pressing like the desert sun. Back in the war, he'd sworn to Jax and the others, no man left behind. Blood or not, that oath had carried them through sandstorms and ambushes, forging the vipers from shattered soldiers into something unbreakable. Noah's arrival cracked open that vault, reminding him of the brother he'd failed to save, the one whose last words were a plea to keep the light on for the kids. He couldn't ride away from this. I'm sure. This boy's got no one. We find his trail. We end it right. As the afternoon wore on, the clubhouse transformed into a war room of sorts. Maps unrolled across the table, marked with red lines tracing Highway 17's serpentine path through scrubland and forgotten hamlets. Rico's search yielded fragments. A vague report from a roadside diner 2 towns over, whispers of a woman frantic at a gas station, clutching a child before vanishing into the night. No names, but the pieces fit like a puzzle born from desperation. Deeper dives uncovered murmurs of a shadow network. Haulers who moved more than freight, exploiting the lonely stretches where law thinned to whispers. Corruption festered there like rust on chrome, sheriffs turning blind eyes for payoffs, families torn apart in the name of quick cash. Grimm stepped outside for air, the screen door banging shut behind him. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of burnt orange, the distant mountains a jagged silhouette against the horizon. He lit a cigarette, the flame flickering in the breeze that carried the faint, acrid scent of wildfires from miles away. Noah's face haunted him, that silent plea, eyes wide with a wisdom no toddler should bear. What kind of world discarded its own like that? His own losses echoed back, the crash that took his kin, the guilt that rode shotgun ever since. This was redemption's whisper, a chance to honor the oath he'd buried under miles of blacktop. Back inside, Jax clapped a hand on his shoulder, the gesture solid as iron. Crews assembling, words out, 20 riders by dusk, engines tuned for the long haul. We trace the box's origin, hit the diners, the truck stops. If it's that ring, we expose them clean. No guns, just truth. His eyes gleamed with the fire of shared purpose, the Viper's bond a lifeline in the gathering storm. They geared up as shadows lengthened, leathers creaking, boots thudding against the plank floor. Lena secured Noah in a makeshift cradle of blankets, promising to watch him like her own. Grimm mounted his Harley, the engine's roar a thunderous vow slicing the twilight. The convoy formed behind him, headlights piercing the dusk like stars aligning for battle. They rolled out onto the access road, gravel spitting under tires, the wind whipping tales of loyalty into the night. Miles blurred into a hypnotic rhythm, the highway's white lines a vein pulsing with secrets. At the first stop, a dingy fuel station glowing under neon haze, Rico worked his charm on the attendant. A grizzled vet with stories etched in his wrinkles. Saw a beat-up sedan last night. The man grunted over coffee steam. Woman driving, kid in back. looked spooked, like she was running from ghosts, headed east toward the old quarry. It was a thread, thin but real. Grimm's resolve hardened, the promise solidifying. For Noah, for the boy he'd failed, he'd unravel this web. The vipers pressed on, a phalanx of justice in the gathering dark, where corruption met its match in unbreakable honor. As the engines faded into the distance, the first stars pricked the velvet sky, witnesses to a ride that would test bonds and forge legends. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The night air sliced through the convoy like a blade honed on desert winds, carrying the sharp tang of sage and cooling earth as the iron vipers carved their way east along the fractured ribbon of Highway 17. Grimm led the pack, his Harley's headlight cutting a silver path through the inky blackness. The engine's steady thrum, a heartbeat sinking with the resolve pounding in his chest. Behind him, 20 riders formed a rolling thunder, Jax's customized chopper rumbling low. Rico's scout bike weaving ahead like a shadow hound. Noah's locket bounced against Grimm's chest, tucked inside his shirt now, a talisman warm against his skin. The initials burned in his mind, a silent vow amid the roar. Find the truth, shield the broken. They hit the old quarry just past midnight, the place a yawning scar in the moonlit hillside, chain-link fences sagging like weary sentinels under the weight of neglect. Floodlights from a distant worksite cast erratic shadows over rusted machinery and piles of gravel that whispered of forgotten labor. The attendant's words echoed in Grimm's ears. Spooked woman, kid in back, a breadcrumb leading into this forsaken pit where the highway's underbelly festered. No semis here tonight, just the hush of wind through skeletal catwalks and the faint drip of water from unseen cracks. The vipers dismounted in silence, boots crunching on loose stone, their leathers blending into the gloom like ghosts of old battles. Rico signaled from the perimeter, his flashlight beam darting like a firefly. Tracks match. Fresh tire marks from a sedan, veered off the main drag about a mile back. Looks like they stopped here hasty. He knelt by the indentations, fingers tracing the pattern in the dust, the air heavy with the metallic bite of exposed ore. Grimm nodded, scanning the darkness. This wasn't just a dump site. The quarry hummed with illicit life. Faint voices murmuring from a cluster of trailers tucked against the far wall, the glow of lanterns flickering like wary eyes. Smugglers, the rumors had said, ferrying desperation across borders under cover of night. Families bartered away, lives traded for silence. If Noah had come from here, the web ran deeper than a single act of cruelty. Jax sidled up, his prosthetic legs steady on the uneven ground, breath fogging in the chill. We fan out quiet, no storming in yet. Get eyes on 'em. See if that woman's face rings any bells. His voice was a low rumble, laced with the caution of a man who'd stared down ambushes and lived to regret the rash ones. Grimm felt the old pull, that wartime bond tightening like a noose around doubt. They'd sworn oaths in foxholes, slick with sweat and sand, promising to drag each other from the jaws of hell. Now, with a child's fate dangling, those words resurrected, demanding action over fear. They split into pairs, shadows slipping through the underbrush. Grimm and Rico crept toward the trailers, the ground sloping into a gravel-strewn bowl where the air thickened with the sour reek of unwashed bodies and cheap fuel. A low conversation drifted on the breeze, Spanish laced with English, urgent and edged with desperation. The boss won't wait. Kids' leverage gone. They dumped it to buy time. A woman's voice, brittle as cracked glass, cut through. Grimm froze, heart slamming against his ribs. Leverage? Noah, reduced to a pawn in some shadowed game. Peering from behind a derelict forklift, they spotted her, mid-30s, hollow-cheeked, huddled by a fire barrel with a man in a threadbare jacket. Her hands twisted a rag, eyes darting like a cornered animal's. No child in sight, but the grief etched her face spoke volumes, vestiges of a loss that clawed deeper than any wound. The man glanced over his shoulder, voice dropping. "You think they won't come for you next? That ring owns these roads. Cops are in pockets deeper than yours." Grim's blood ran cold, the pieces snapping into a grim mosaic. This woman, perhaps Noah's mother, trapped in a vice of coercion, her silence bought with the unthinkable. He signaled Rico to hold, but the scout's eyes narrowed, spotting movement. Two figures emerging from a trailer, burly types with the swagger of enforcers, holsters glinting under the lantern light. Corruption's foot soldiers, turning blind eyes for a cut of the profits. The Vipers were outnumbered here, but retreat tasted like betrayal. Grim's mind raced back to the box on the highway, Noah's unblinking stare, a mirror to his own buried failures. He'd walked away once from a promise shattered in twisted metal. Not again. A pebble skittered under Rico's boot, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the quiet. Heads turned, lanterns swinging. "Who's there?" one enforcer barked, hand dropping to his sidearm. The woman bolted upright, her rag fluttering to the dirt like a white flag of surrender. Jax's voice hissed from the comms earpiece they'd rigged. "Pull back now! We got what we need!" But Grim hesitated, locked on the woman's face. In the firelight he saw it, a flicker of recognition, or maybe just shared despair. She mouthed something, "Help!" before the enforcers advanced, boots pounding the gravel like war drums. The Vipers melted into the night, engines firing in staggered bursts to mask their escape, the quarry fading behind in a haze of dust and regret. Back on the open road, the convoy regrouped at a roadside pullout, the stars overhead indifferent witnesses. Grim killed his bike, the silence amplifying the adrenaline's echo. "She's in it deep," he said, voice rough as he pulled the locket free, its weight heavier now. "Noah's mother, or close enough. That ring, they're using kids as chips, forcing hands." Jax rubbed his jaw, the lines of old scars deepening. "Means we're stepping on toes that bite back. Authorities? Hell, half of them are bought." Lena's voice crackled over the radio from the clubhouse, where she'd stayed with Noah. "Boys stirring, asking for you in his sleep. Man with the roar. Whatever you do, bring this home clean." The group murmured assent, the fire of loyalty kindling brighter in the dark. Rico sketched the trailer's layout on a napkin, marking escape routes and weak points. This wasn't vengeance. It was justice's slow burn, a promise etched in chrome and brotherhood. As dawn's first blush crept over the horizon, painting the asphalt in soft greys, Grim felt the shift. A reckoning building, where secrets unraveled and honor reclaimed its due. The woman's plea lingered, a ghost on the wind, pulling them deeper into the storm. For Noah, for the oaths that bound them, the ride pressed on, unyielding as the rising sun. The first light of dawn bled across the horizon like a wound, slowly healing, turning the pullout's cracked asphalt into a canvas of muted pinks and greys. The Iron Viper's bike stood in a ragged semicircle, engines ticking cool in the morning hush, exhaust fumes lingering like ghosts of the night's frenzy. Grim dismounted, his boots grinding against loose pebbles that skittered into the scrub, the faint scent of dew-kissed sage mingling with the acrid bite of spent adrenaline. The locket hung heavy around his neck, a pulse against his skin. Noah's initials, a brand that seared deeper with every revelation. The woman's face from the quarry, hollowed by fear, lips forming that silent help, replayed in his mind, a flicker of shared desperation that clawed at the walls he'd built around his heart. Jax leaned against his chopper, wiping sweat from his brow with a scarred forearm, the prosthetic leg planted firm like an anchor in the uncertainty. "That was too close, brother. Enforcers like those don't play. They're the ring's muscle, bought and paid for." His voice carried the weight of foxhole wisdom. low and measured, eyes scanning the empty road as if expecting shadows to rise from the mist. Rico paced nearby, folding the napkin sketch with precise folds, the ink smudges on his fingers dark as the secrets they'd glimpsed. Trailers were loaded, crates stamped for cross-border runs, not just goods. Folks whispered about passengers hidden in the holds. That woman's no willing player. Leverage, they said. Noah was the price for her silence. Grim nodded, the wind tugging at his vest, carrying the distant low of cattle from unseen pastures. He'd seen coercion's face before, in war zones where families traded kin for survival, in the mirror after his own losses left him hollow. This ring preyed on that fracture, twisting desperation into chains, with corrupt badges turning the key. Calling in the law felt like handing Noah back to the wolves. Reports would vanish in bureaucratic fog, the woman left to rot. No, this demanded the viper's way, truth carved from the grit, loyalty as the blade. We circle back at dusk, but smarter. Infiltrate, get her out. Rico, dig deeper on the initials. Lena, keep Noah close. Tell him the raw's coming home. Back at the clubhouse by mid-morning, the air hummed with purpose, sunlight streaming through open windows to illuminate dust motes dancing like fireflies in reverse. Lena had Noah perched on her knee in the main room, the boy clutching a toy truck scavenged from the club's junk drawer, its wheels spinning silently under his small pushes. His eyes lit when Grim entered, that unblinking trust blooming into a tentative smile, the bruise on his temple fading to a shadow under her careful watch. He ate solid, oatmeal and fruit, she said, voice soft as engine oil on leather. Called you raw man in his babble. Whatever hell he came from, he's latching on. Grim knelt, ruffling the boy's dust-matted hair, the warmth of that tiny hand on his knee, cracking something long sealed. Promises echoed unspoken. The one to his fallen kin, now extended to this foundling, a bridge across the abyss. Rico's laptop glowed on the table, screens flickering with encrypted forums and grainy feeds from border cams. Got a hit, he announced, voice taut as a bowstring. Noah Vance, Toddler, reported missing from a transient camp near the river bend 3 days back. Mother, Elena Vance, waitress turned ghost after skipping shifts. Debts piled high, whispers of threats from haulers who collect on favors. The pieces aligned like gears in a well-oiled machine. Elena, cornered by the ring, forced to surrender her son as collateral. The box on the highway, a desperate bid to sever ties without drawing blood. But the enforcer's presence meant eyes everywhere. Corruption threading through local sheriffs like veins in marble, payoffs ensuring the lost stayed lost. Jack slammed a fist on the wood, the thud reverberating like a distant thunderclap. We can't storm blind. That ring's got reach. Tips to the law, ambushes on the road. One wrong move, and we're the ones boxed up. His eyes met Grim's, the bond of their war-forged oath shimmering in the tension. They'd pulled each other from rubble-strewn streets overseas, vowing no soul abandoned to the grind. Now, with Elena's plea hanging like smoke, doubt crept in, a ethical snare weighing mercy against the storm it might unleash. Grim felt it coil in his gut, the old ghosts whispering of failures, the crash that stole his family, the promise he'd whispered too late. Redemption wasn't clean, it demanded sacrifice, the quiet honor of standing when the world urged flight. As noon crested, the Vipers planned in hushed tones, maps annotated with escape vectors, decoy rides to draw heat. Grim stepped out to the porch, the sun warming his face, the horizon a vast promise of trials ahead. A truck rumbled past on the access road, kicking up dust that settled like a veil, and in that moment, clarity struck. This wasn't just about Noah or Eleanor. It was reclaiming the light, dimmed by years of riding solo, weaving the chosen family into a shield unbreakable. He'd call in more, old allies from dusty rallies. Veterans who'd traded uniforms for vests until the convoy swelled to drown out corruption's roar. By afternoon, the first reinforcements arrived, a dozen bikes rolling in formation, engines harmonizing in a symphony of resolve. The clubhouse swelled with familiar faces, tattooed arms clasping shoulders, stories traded over lukewarm beers. Grim addressed them from the steps, voice steady as the earth's turn. We ride for the forgotten, a mother's trapped, a boy's waiting, no badges, no deals, just us, honoring what's right. Nods rippled through the crowd, the air electric with shared fire. Lena handed Noah to Grim for a moment. The boys wait a grounding force amid the brewing tempest. Dusk fell like a curtain, painting the sky in bruised purples as the expanded crew, 30 strong now, geared up. Headlights pierced the twilight, a constellation on the move, bound for the quarry's edge. Grim mounted, the Harley's growl vibrating through him like a renewed heartbeat, Elena's face fueling the throttle. The road ahead twisted with peril, enforcers alerted perhaps, shadows lengthening with intent. But in the rear view, Noah's locket gleamed, a reminder. Justice wasn't won in fury, but in the unyielding pull of loyalty, the moral compass guiding through the dark. As tires met blacktop, the wind carried their vow forward, a force gathering to shatter chains forged in silence. If this story's gripping your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The twilight deepened into a bruised indigo as the convoy of 30 iron vipers sliced through the cooling night, headlights carving luminous tunnels in the enveloping dark. Grim's Harley led the charge, its engine a guttural symphony that drowned the whisper of wind through the scrub, carrying the sharp, resinous scent of pine from the encroaching hills. The locket thumped against his chest with each bump in the road, a rhythmic reminder of Noah's trusting gaze back at the clubhouse, where Lena's watchful eyes promised safety amid the storm. Elena's silent plea from the quarry replayed in Grim's mind like a looped reel, lips forming help in the firelight, a mother's fracture laid bare. This ride wasn't vengeance. It was the fulfillment of oaths whispered in foxholes and sealed under starlit skies, a chosen family's stand against the rot that festered unchecked. They approached the quarry's perimeter under a canopy of gathering clouds, the moon a sliver peeking through like a wary eye, engines cut to idles, then silence. The sudden hush amplifying the distant clank of machinery and the low murmur of voices from the trailers below. Jax signaled the split, half the crew to circle the flanks, drawing any patrols with feigned engine noise. The rest, led by Grim and Rico, to infiltrate the core on foot. Boots muffled on gravel, they descended the slope, shadows merging with the jagged silhouettes of rusted excavators, the air thick with the metallic tang of ore and the faint oily smoke from dying embers. Grim's pulse matched the tension coiling in his gut, memories of ambushes overseas flooding back, where one misstep meant brothers lost to the sand. But here, the stakes were softer, more fragile, a woman ensnared, a child waiting for reunion. Rico paused at the edge of the bowl, his breath steady, as he pointed to fresh tracks weaving toward the central trailers. Enforcers doubled up since last night, 4, maybe 5. They're expecting trouble. His whisper was a thread in the dark, eyes sharp under the brim of his cap. Grim nodded, the weight of leadership settling like dust on his shoulders. He'd pulled Jax from a burning Humvee once, swearing no more graves for the loyal. Now, with Elena's desperation as the spark, doubt flickered. Storming in could free her or chain them all in retaliation's grip. Corruption's tendrils reached far. Sheriffs tipped off, roads blocked. But retreat, that betrayed the core of who they were, the silent honor that bound vipers in iron. They crept closer, the ground sloping into a moon-dappled hollow where lanterns swung from trailer hitches, casting erratic glows on stacked crates labeled innocuous, farm tools, engine parts, but reeking of hidden cargo. the sour undernote of fear sweat and confined humanity. A guard patrolled the perimeter, his flashlight beam sweeping like a scythe, holster swaying at his hip. Grim motioned Rico low, the two flattening against a derelict truck bed, hearts pounding in unison with the drip of condensation from overhead pipes. The guard passed, muttering into a radio about late shipments, his voice laced with the boredom of bought loyalty. As he vanished into shadow, Grim rose, slipping toward the main trailer where Eleanor had been spotted. A window glowed faintly. Curtains drawn but not sealed, silhouettes dancing within like players in a shadowed drama. Peering through a slit, Grim's breath caught. Elena sat at a rickety table, hands bound loosely with zip ties, her face gaunt under the harsh bulb, eyes hollowed by exhaustion and unshed tears. Across from her loomed a figure in a rumpled suit, the ring's mid-level handler, no doubt, his gestures sharp as he leaned in, voice a venomous hiss carrying on the still air. "The kid's gone, but you're not off the hook. One word to the wrong ear, and your trail ends in the river." Eleanor's head bowed, shoulders trembling, but her jaw set in quiet defiance. A mother's fire banked but unquenched. No sign of Noah, but the locket's initials confirmed her tie. This was the fracture point, where desperation met coercion's blade. Rico tugged Grim's sleeve, nodding toward the trailer's undercarriage. "Weak spot, loose panel. We cut her free. Slip out quiet." But as they moved, a twig snapped underfoot, the crack echoing like a warning shot. The handler's head jerked up, barking orders. Footsteps pounded, enforcers converging, radios crackling with alerts. Jax's voice buzzed in Grim's earpiece. "Flanks hot, they're mobilizing. Exfil now." Chaos erupted, shouts slicing the night, lanterns flaring as shadows detached into armed forms. Grim kicked the panel loose, the metal screeching softly, and hauled Elena through in a tangle of limbs and whispered urgency. "We're getting you out. Noah's safe." She gasped, eyes widening in the dim light. Recognition dawning amid the fear. "The boy! They took him for the debt. I had no choice." Her words choked off as an enforcer rounded the corner, silhouette bulky against the glow. Grim shoved her behind him, Rico drawing a tire iron, not for blood but deflection. The clang of metal on metal ringing as they parried the advance. Punches landed in the fray, grunts mingling with the scuffle of boots on dirt. But the Viper's numbers turned the tide, Jax and others bursting from the flanks, a wall of leathers forming to shield the retreat. No shots fired, honors code held, even in the heat. But the air crackled with the threat, enforcers falling back under the onslaught of sheer resolve. They burst from the quarry's maw. Elena clutched between Grim and Rico on a spare bike, the convoy reforming in a thunderous exodus. Engines roared to life, drowning the pursuing shouts, tires spitting gravel as they tore onto the highway. The wind whipped tears from Elena's eyes, her arms locked around Grim's waist, the first sobs breaking free like released captives. Miles blurred, the stars wheeling overhead in silent approval, until they hit a safe pullout far from the fray, the group circling wagons under the vast night sky. Elena slid to the ground, knees buckling, but Grim steadied her, his grip firm yet gentle. "Noah's waiting. Tell us the rest. Who's pulling the strings?" Her voice trembled, piecing the puzzle. A web of haulers and bent officials. Debts from a sick husband forcing her hand, the ring demanding payment in flesh. "They said it'd be quick, just till I paid up." Shame colored her words, but Grim silenced it with a nod, the shared scars of loss bridging the gap. Jax watched the road, prosthetic leg tapping impatience, while Rico radioed Lena, "Inbound with the mother, keep the little man close." As Dawn's fingers crept over the eastern ridge, gilding the horizon in soft gold, the weight lifted fractionally. Elena's rescue was a victory etched in bruises and bonds, but the ring's shadow loomed larger, retaliation brewing, corruption's full face yet to reveal. Grim felt the oath renew, pulsing like the engine's hum, for Noah, for Elena, for the promises that outlasted the dark. The ride home carried them forward, a phalanx of light piercing the gathering threats, where loyalty's fire burned brightest against the cold machinery of wrong. The first rays of dawn pierced the horizon like tentative fingers, gilding the edges of the clubhouse's weathered roof as the convoy rolled in, a weary procession of rumbling engines fading to exhausted purrs. Dust settled in lazy swirls around the bikes, kicked up from the night's frantic escape, carrying the mingled scents of scorched rubber, sweat-soaked leather, and the faint, earthy promise of morning dew. Grim dismounted first, his boots thudding solidly on the gravel lot, every muscle aching from the adrenaline's ebb. Elena clung to his arm, her steps unsteady, face pale and streaked with the grime of captivity, but her eyes, those wide, haunted pools, held a spark of fragile hope, ignited by the sight of the ramshackle sanctuary that now stood as her refuge. Inside, the main room glowed with the soft warmth of lanterns and the aroma of fresh coffee brewing on the old percolator, steam curling like whispered secrets. Noah stirred on the couch, bundled in Lena's quilts, his small form twisting at the sound of the door creaking open. When his gaze landed on Elena, a gasp escaped him. Not a cry, but a soft, recognizing coo that bridged the chasm of their separation. She rushed forward, knees buckling as she gathered him close, the boy's arms wrapping around her neck in a silent reunion that needed no words. Tears traced clean paths through the dirt on her cheeks, and Grim turned away. The rawness of it stirring echoes of his own shattered family, the crash that had left him adrift on endless roads. This was redemption's quiet gift. Lives mended not by force, but by the pull of unbreakable bonds. Lena stepped back, her calloused hands folding over her heart, eyes misty under the brim of her cap. He's been waiting, little warrior. Kept asking for the roar that saved him. And Majax and Rico filed in behind, the crew dispersing to corners of the room, some slumping into chairs with weary sighs, others checking weapons that remained holstered, symbols of restraint rather than intent. The air thickened with unspoken questions, the weight of the quarry's shadows lingering like smoke from a dying fire. Grim poured Eleanor a mug of coffee, the steam rising in gentle spirals, and guided her to the table where maps lay scattered, marked with the night's hasty annotations. As Noah nestled against her, Elena's voice emerged, halting at first, then steadying like an engine finding its rhythm. It started with my husband. Sick, bills piling like storm clouds. We crossed paths with the haulers at a truck stop, thought a loan would tide us over. Her fingers traced Noah's back, the locket now dangling between them, its cheap gleam a testament to fragile hopes. They weren't moving freight. It was people, families fleeing shadows, paying with everything they had. When we couldn't repay, they took Noah as leverage, said it'd buy time. I fought, but... Her words trailed into a shudder, the vestiges of coercion etched in her posture. A mother's defiance bent but not broken, the ring's reach unfurled in her tale, a network woven through dusty diners and backroom deals, sheriffs pocketing silence, turning highways into veins for desperation's flow. Grim's jaw tightened, the coffee mug warm in his grip, its bitterness mirroring the bile rising in his throat. He'd ridden these roads for years, blind to the undercurrents until Noah's box cracked the facade. Corruption wasn't a distant storm, it was the rot beneath the asphalt, preying on the vulnerable, while oaths like his gathered dust. Jax leaned against the wall, prosthetic leg crossed at the ankle, his face a map of furrowed resolve. We got you out clean, but they won't forget. That handler, he radioed for backup we barely outran. Means eyes on us now. Rhodes watched. Rico nodded from his laptop perch, screens flickering with alerts from anonymous feeds, whispers of retaliation brewing in border outposts. and forces mobilizing like ants from a disturbed hill. The room fell into a charged hush, the only sounds Noah's contented murmurs and the distant call of a morning bird outside. Grim felt the ethical snare tighten. Pursue the ring's heart, expose the sheriff's complicity, and risk the viper's fragile peace, or fade back, protect what they'd salvaged, and let the shadows claim another victory. His mind flashed to the war, to brothers pulled from wreckage with promises of no one left, oaths that had forged this family from the ashes of loss. Walking away now would echo his greatest failure. The night he'd ridden too late, arriving to twisted metal and empty echoes. No, this was the call to honor, the quiet sacrifice that defined them, chosen kin standing as bulwark against a world's cynicism. Elena looked up, clutching Noah closer, her voice a thread of steel amid the vulnerability. They have names, ledgers in the main depot, 20 miles north, hidden in an old warehouse by the river bend. Proof of the payoffs, the roots, if you get that. Hope flickered in her eyes, a moral compass aligning with theirs, the shared pain of fractured families binding her to the circle. Grim met Jax's gaze, the unspoken accord passing like a nod in battle. Ride on, but wise. We hit at midday when shifts change. Small team, in and out. Rico scouts, Lena holds the fort here. No blood, just the truth to burn their lies. The crew murmured assent, the bond solidifying like cooling metal in a forge. As the sun climbed higher, flooding the room with golden light that danced across scarred tabletops, preparations unfolded with practiced efficiency, maps refolded, bikes tuned with the clink of wrenches and hiss of air tools. Grim knelt by Noah once more, the boy's tiny hand grasping his finger, that unblinking trust, a balm against the gathering peril. Elena watched, gratitude softening her features, the locket swinging like a pendulum of second chances. Outside, engines idled in anticipation, the air humming with the scent of heated oil and resolve. By noon, the strike team, Grim, Jax, Rico, and 4 steadfast riders, rolled out under a sky of unyielding blue, the highway stretching like a vein toward confrontation. Wind whipped through their formation, carrying the faint mineral tang of the approaching river, each mile a step deeper into the moral fray. The depot loomed in their minds, a fortress of corrugated steel and guarded secrets. Where justice's scales tipped toward the light, Grim's heart steadied on the throttle, the promise thrumming louder than the roar. For the boy, the mother, the oaths that refused to die. Shadows awaited, but so did the dawn of reckoning, forged in loyalty's unyielding fire. The midday sun beat down like a relentless forge hammer, turning the highway into a shimmering mirage of heat waves that distorted the horizon. Grim's Harley cut through the haze. The engine's growl, a steady undercurrent to the wind's hot lash across his face, carrying the briny tang of the approaching river, mingled with the dry dust of sun-baked earth. Jax rode flank, his chopper's pipes rumbling in sync, while Rico scouted ahead on his lean scout bike, weaving like a hawk scanning for prey. The 4 others formed a tight diamond behind, leathers gleaming under the glare, their silence a testament to the gravity of the ride. The locket pressed against Grim's chest, warmed by his skin. Noah's initials a quiet talisman urging him forward. Elena's words echoed, the depot's ledgers as the key to shattering the ring's grip, proof that could drag corruption into the light without a single shot fired. The warehouse squatted by the river bend like a rusted behemoth, its corrugated walls scarred by years of neglect and illicit use, chain-link fences topped with barbed wire glinting viciously in the sun. Trucks idled in the yard, their exhaust pluming lazy clouds that blurred the outlines of stacked crates and shadowed loading docks. The air hummed with the low drone of generators and the distant splash of the river against muddy banks, a deceptive calm masking the pulse of hidden dealings. Rico signaled from a rise overlooking the site, his hand slicing the air in a halt gesture. Guards at the main gate, 2 visible, probably more inside. Shifts changing now, windows tight. His voice crackled low over the earpiece, eyes narrowed against the glare as he traced the perimeter with binoculars, spotting the flicker of movement near a side entrance where workers milled like ants in the heat. Grim killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the river's murmur and the faint clank of metal from within. They'd parked the bikes in a scrub-choked gully a quarter-mile out, approaching on foot through the tall grasses that whispered against their jeans, the ground soft and yielding under boots caked with dust. Jax limped slightly on the uneven terrain, his prosthetic leg sinking into the loam, but his face was set in grim determination, the lines of old battles etching deeper. In through the side, Rico and me on lookout. You and the boys grab the docks, then Ghost. No room for heroics. This was surgical, a promise fulfilled through cunning and steel-willed restraint. Grim nodded, the weight of the Viper's collective oath pressing like the sun on his shoulders, the one sworn in bloodied sands, now extended to Elena's fragile hope and Noah's innocent gaze. They slipped past the fence where a section sagged under overgrown vines, the barbs snagging at sleeves like greedy fingers. Inside the compound, the air thickened with the oily reek of machinery and the faint, acrid bite of chemicals from hidden compartments. Shadows pooled under loading ramps, and Grim's team darted from cover to cover, behind a pallet of rusted drums. Then a derelict forklift, heartbeats syncing with the rhythm of distant shouts from the changing shift. The main office loomed at the yard's rear, a prefab unit with grimy windows overlooking the river, its door propped open against the heat. Rico peeled off to the roof access, vanishing like smoke, while Jax took position by the gate, radio silent but vigilant. Grim led the breach, easing the door open with a gloved hand, the hinges sighing softly. The interior was a dim warren of filing cabinets and cluttered desks, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent that cast harsh shadows across yellowed papers and flickering computer screens. The handler from the quarry, his rumpled suit now sweat-stained, hunched over a ledger at the far end, oblivious, muttering curses at a stack of manifests. No guards here. The ring's arrogance lay in their isolation, sheriffs bought to keep watch from afar. Grim's team fanned out, boots muffled on the linoleum, breaths held as they rifled drawers, fingers sifting through invoices stamped with false roots, notes on special cargo that twisted Grim's gut with the echo of Noah's box. One rider, a quiet veteran named Tate with a cross tattooed on his neck, unearthed a locked safe under the desk, cracking it with a slim tool in seconds, the click echoing like a verdict. Inside, ledgers bound in cracked leather, pages dense with names, dates, and payoff tallies, sheriff's badges listed like commodities, routes mapping the highway's underbelly. Elena's husband's debt appeared in stark ink. Noah's initials scrawled as collateral, the web of coercion laid bare. Grim snapped photos with a burner phone, the flash a brief lightning in the gloom, each click sealing fates without a drop of blood. But as Tate zipped the satchel, the handler stirred, head snapping up, eyes widening in the dim light. What the? He lunged for a desk drawer, but Grim was faster, pinning his arm with a vice-like grip, the man's face contorting in a snarl of fear and fury. "Easy," Grim growled, voice low as gravel, the scent of the man's cheap cologne mixing with panic sweat. "We're not here for you. Walk away, or the truth walks with us." The handler's defiance crumbled under the weight of four shadowed figures, the ledger's exposure a noose tightening. No blows landed. Justice's poetry lay in the unraveling, the moral weight crumpling corruption like paper. Jax's voice buzzed in the earpiece. "Guards incoming! Move!" They shoved the handler into a closet, door barred with a chair, and melted out the back, satchel slung over Grim's shoulder like a hard-won shield. The escape was a blur of heat and haste, dashing through the yard as shouts erupted. Engines firing in the gully to mask their sprint. Bullets? None flew. The ring's muscle hesitated, perhaps sensing the shift, the evidence of poison they couldn't chase without self-incrimination. The convoy thundered onto the access road, river fading behind in a silver ribbon under the sun, wind tearing at their formation like a cleansing gale. Grim's heart raced not with fear, but release, the promise fulfilled, oaths honoured in the quiet triumph of truth over tyranny. Back at the clubhouse by late afternoon, the air buzzed with victory's hush, sunlight slanting through windows to illuminate the table where the ledgers spread like captured flags. Elena pored over them with trembling hands, Noah on her lap, his small fingers tracing the pages as if understanding the reclamation. This ends it, she whispered, voice breaking on gratitude's edge, the locket now around her neck, whole again. Grim stood by the door, Jax clapping his shoulder in silent accord, the vipers gathering in a circle of scarred faces and steadfast nods. Rico uploaded the files to secure channels, anonymous drops to clean feds beyond the local rot, the evidence a spark to ignite investigations that would burn the ring from within. As evening fell, painting the sky in deepening crimsons, Elena gathered her things, Noah yawning in her arms, the boy waving a tiny hand at Grim with a sleepy roar. She paused at the threshold, eyes meeting his in the golden light. You gave us back our tomorrow, that promise, it saved us. Grim nodded, the words a balm on old wounds, his own redemption woven into the fabric of chosen family. The vipers unbreakable, a legacy of silent courage against the world's cruel turns. The door closed softly behind them, engines humming to life outside as escorts formed for safe passage. Grim lit a cigarette on the porch, smoke curling into the twilight, the river's distant rush a lullaby of closure. Shadows had lifted, not by fury but by loyalty's enduring light, promises kept, honor reclaimed, a ride that echoed into the stars. Thank you for riding along on this journey of grit and grace. If these tales of unbreakable bonds stir your soul, hit subscribe and join us for more stories where honor roars loudest in the quietest moments.